I did these videos about the new Leica SL3 menus. I get asked a lot if the SL3 and the Q3 are sharing the same menu. No, they don't. The second question I get asked is, can you do a video about the Q3 menu? Here it is. Before we go through the menu of the Q3, let me tell you about my menu and settings philosophy. On every of my cameras, I have user profiles. That's no different with the Q3. With the SL3, I have also those profiles. I go through them in two videos, one about photo and one about my video settings. Here it is a little bit different. I have one video because I have 6 profiles available, like on every Leica camera. But here on the Q3, I only set up 6 profiles, and each profile is focused on either photo or video. One of the reasons because the Q3 and the SL3 don't share the same menu is because they are so different in functionality. The SL3 has much more functionality than the Q3. The Q3 is more a point-and-shoot camera, and I have set it up exactly for this. Of course, it has great video features as well. So 4 of my profiles are video profiles, 2 of my profiles are photo profiles. It's different with the SL3. I have 6 profiles. Each profile is set up for photo and for video. The differences start on the body, of course, and on the buttons and the dials. The Q3 only has 1 dial. The SL3 has 3 dials. The 1 dial is here. It's the thumb dial. I have set this up as my ISO dial. So if I turn it here, the ISO changes. In the factory setting, this dial is set for EV compensation. I don't use that, so I have just set it on ISO. And when I press the button, I have set it to change my user profiles. Then you have actually only 4 function buttons. We're going to come to them later. So let's look into the main control center. In the SL3, this control center got a complete graphical redesign. The Q3 still looks like the M11 or like the SL2 or Q2. We have the 3 rows. We cannot customize this menu. The first button here I'm going to talk about is the exposure mode. This is also different in the Q3 because the exposure mode depends on how you have set your camera and your lens. Now I'm in aperture priority because I have set the manual aperture here on the aperture ring of the camera. If I turn this to A here, it switches into P. The same is here. Let's focus on the shutter dial. If I now turn the shutter dial, it goes into shutter priority. I cannot set exposure mode through pressing this button. I only can set scene modes, which I never use. Let's go back to the control center. The same here with the aperture. We don't have an aperture dial like in the SL3. We have the aperture here on the lens, which is more like an M feeling, which I really like to have it physically as a ring on the lens. And then again, we have the ISO settings. We can turn this here. Otherwise, of course, I can also do this here. And then you can use the wheel, or you can move this around. In the second row, we have our focus mode. I have on single. The second field is the AF mode. I have set it on field metering. I always use field metering because this gives me, from my work, the most flexibility. I don't work with the all automatic thing because then something gets in focus which I don't want. Sometimes when I do portraits, I'm switching into the face eye auto detection mode, but sometimes I also use the field metering because I feel better in control. Then we have the drive mode, which I have on single. Then we have the film style, which is standard, which doesn't bother me because I'm shooting DNGs and not JPEG. Then we have the user profiles. This is actually very important for me. So if I press here, I can toggle through the different profiles. And then here we have exposure metering. I have set this on multi-field because I think it gives me the best results. I have all of my cameras set on multi-field. There is this highlight weighted metering, which is also, especially when you have very bright days and very bright spots in your picture, that can be very interesting because then you don't blow out your highlights. But for me, especially when you have high contrast in the picture. Sometimes, even though you can recover the darker parts, sometimes they're so underexposed that you have noise, and then sometimes it's an artistical decision to have a highlight blown out. So I think I have the much better control in multi-field metering. Then the next is the white balance. I have it on auto. Then we have the file format. I have set to large DNG. I want the best possible results out of my 60 megapixels. Then we have the Leica Photos app, and we have our favorites. The favorites is something that do not exist anymore in the SL3 menu structure. I actually like the favorites. What it does is when I, from the control center, press one more time on menu, I come into the first menu and it's the favorites menu. I only have two items here. I have Leica Photos and I have the command to format my SD card. Those are the menu points I need the most, because I have set up my profile and my profile just has everything I need. The two things I need is to connect to my Leica Photos app and to format my SD card. When you press once more, you land in the first page of the main menu. There you have drive mode. As I told you, I have it on single. In drive mode, let me mention two things. Interval shooting, I have set to 300 pictures. I have set it to 1 second because this I use as my self-timer. When I do have to make a picture where I have to be in the picture as well, I use the interval shooting. So it makes a picture every second. So there is a big chance that one of the pictures is good. So I run into the picture, we laugh around, I go back, and then I have like 10, 15 pictures I can choose from. Once you set this, and you go back, it keeps those settings. Same is with exposure bracketing. I have set this on 5 pictures and I have 2 stops in between the 5 pictures, and I have automatic on. What that does is I press the shutter button once and it makes those 5 pictures. If I have turned that off, I have to manually shoot every picture. Self-timer I have off. Let's check focusing. Focus mode I have on single. As soon as I have moving parts, I sometimes decide to go into continuous, but I actually almost always am in single. Then I have the AF mode. I already talked about that field. Sometimes when I do portraits, I go into spot because then I can really point at the eye I want to have my focus on. But again, with the Q3, I'm not doing that much portraits. What I want to mention here is the AF assistant lamp. I have turned this off. I don't like that lamp. I think it's intrusive and it takes when I'm in a room, especially when I'm in a darker room, because it helps you when you're in a darker room to hit your focus, of course. But when I am in a darker room, I don't want to have the attention on me. And as soon as the AF lamp goes on, the focus is on me and I don't want that. Focus assistant, I have auto magnification set to on. As soon as I move into manual focus and as soon as I turn the manual focus ring, it zooms in and the auto magnification helps me to get my focus. Exposure metering recovered. Exposure compensation I rarely use. ISO now at the moment is set on 800. This is just because I've messed around with the button. I mostly have it on auto. Second page, we have the auto ISO settings. I have not messed with that. The white balance, as I told you, is on auto. The file format is DNG. Why should I go smaller? And I actually really don't like to work in JPEG. I always work in DNG. I use the DNG resolution, 60 megapixels. You have with the Q3, as you have with the SL3 and the M11, you have the possibility to have 3 different resolutions. There is a lot of testing out there. Then you don't gain any benefit in low light when you go and take, for example, a medium setting here, 36 megapixel, because the 60 megapixels delivers you the great results. I want to use that. JPEG settings, as I said, I don't use JPEGs, but let me go through the JPEG setting for a moment. You also have the triple resolution option here. And here, let me point you to 2 menu points. The film style. Those are the traditional Leica style, standard, vivid, natural to monochrome setups. Now we have the Leica looks. I have made a dedicated video about the Q3 and the Leica Photos app. In that video, I show you in detail how you can set up your Q3 and how you can download the Leica looks onto your camera. I even show you the different looks and what they do. So if you're interested in that and if you're a JPEG shooter, maybe you check out that video after we're done with this. I'm going to put a link in the description. Then we have IDR, which is on auto, which again, I don't use because I'm not shooting in JPEG. Scene mode, I have not touched. The Q3 has an optical image stabilization. I have a handheld profile. I come to this again when I'm talking about profiles. In the handheld profile, it's turned on. In the tripod profile, I turn it off because when you have it on a tripod, when you want it to be really still, the image stabilization can do weird things, so you have to turn it off. The photo aspect ratio is 3:2, that's standard. The perspective control I have turned off. I think that's a gimmick. Of course, sometimes when you do architectural photography, I turn it on because when you work in Lightroom with DNG, it's not burned into the picture. When you shoot JPEG, you cannot change it anymore. So I like total control in post. That's why I have turned that off. Shutter type, I have it set on hybrid. Flash, I don't care because I don't use flashes. And exposure preview, I have not touched either. Auto review I've turned off because I don't want to immediately see my pictures. If I want to that, I still have the option to press the play button. Long exposure noise reduction I have turned on. I have not worked in extreme low light with the Q3 yet. I want to test this. I didn't have time yet. That's not true. When I did my movie last year in October, I shot some stills with the Q3 that were at night with hard light and it was fantastic, but that was not long exposure. So it's more like the low light range of the sensor. But I did with the Q2, I did some astrophotography and I shot some really cool pictures in Joshua Tree Park. And there I had the auto nose reduction turned on and it gave me fantastic results. So I highly recommend to turn it on. So now we come to customize control. Here we can customize our buttons. The Leica Q3 has 4 buttons the user can set for him or herself. I have the FN button here and here. I have 2 buttons next to each other. I have this button up here and I have this button here between the arrows. This one is function button number 1. The next one is function button number 2. The center button is the button here between the arrows. And then we have the thumb wheel button, which is the button here in the middle. Then we have the wheel assignment. Let's start with the wheel assignment. You only have 4 functions you can assign to the wheel. You can just turn it off if you don't want to use it at all. You can set it on auto. You can have exposure compensation, which would be the Leica standard. And I have set it on ISO. I don't have to press the button and I win one more button because I just have the wheel on ISO. To change the functionality of one of the buttons, you basically just press it and then it gives me all the possibilities I can assign to this button. I have set this button up here to my user profiles. I'm going to keep that. The same is when I press the button here. Same happens. I have it here. I have drive mode. So you understand the concept. Let's move on. Back in the main menu, page 4, we have digital zoom. I have set this on 28. The Leica Q3 has a fixed lens, a 28mm lens, which is actually a fantastic lens. I like it a lot. I did make a dedicated video on the lens only. Maybe you check this out. Also, after watching this video, I also put this link in the description. You can, as you probably know, use a digital zoom with the Leica Q3. You can set it on 28, 35, 50, 75 or 90 millimeters. I don't use that because I do the cropping in post. Then we're coming to user profiles. I'm gonna skip this. I'm gonna talk in the end about the user profiles. We have capture assistance. This is also very different to the SL3. In the SL3, you can assign 4 pages of capture assistance. Here you only have 4 possibilities to turn on and off. You can have the grid, clipping and the zebra, the level gauge, which is showing you if you're horizontally leveled, and the histogram. I only have turned on the histogram and the leveler because I tend to make uneven pictures. The clipping I have turned off and the grid I have also turned off. To show you this is basically the standard. You can turn off all capture assistance. You can have the basic capture assistance, which is the lower row with your exposure information, and of course all the stuff you have turned on. And the third time you press it, you get also the upper menu bar, which gives you no other information. Mostly have it like this. You need to figure out what works best for you. Page number 5, we have the play mode setup. I don't mess with that either because I'm not looking at pictures so much when I'm shooting. I'm looking at my pictures on my laptop. Display settings, I don't mess with them either. The Leica photos, we already talked about that. Then also you here on page 5, you have the command to format your card. I like to format my cards after I saved them, so that's the first thing I do. So I need that, my favorites. In the Leica SL3, I have it even in my control center, which I cannot do here. Then we have camera settings. In the camera settings, I want to touch on one thing, which is edit file name. I have set this to Q. I think the standard is you have set it on L because Leica does like their file name start with an L because for Leica, but I have set it on Q because then I know from the file name with which camera I took the picture. I have set the SL3, I have set on L. My M10 I have set to M10R. You can have several letters in the M cameras. I don't know why I cannot say Q3 here. It's not possible. With the M cameras you can. And I even have my monochrome set on M10M. So every time I see a file, I know which camera took the picture. And then camera information. Here you get basic information, but here is also something I think is very important, which is copyright information. I have set this on, and I also put in my name in information and artist, which I think you should do as well. Not my name, your name, because it puts your name in the EXIF information of your pictures. Because we don't have content authentication yet on these cameras, I think the one thing you can do to point to you as the artist or to you as the photographer, if you at least have your credit in the EXIF data. The 6th page only has language and reset the camera. Let's jump back now to the user profiles. There's the default profile, which is set from Leica. It's basically your factory reset profile. I never use that. I have my own profiles. I have 6 profiles, which I named. The first 2 are for photography. It's the handheld profile and the tripod profile. They're basically identical. The only difference is that I turned off stabilization in the tripod profile. The video profiles, I have 4 video profiles. I have basically 2 pairs of video profiles, also handheld and tripod. It's 4K handheld and 8K handheld. And then we have 4K tripod and 8K tripod. To show you the video settings, I'm gonna switch into video mode. So one visual help here is the white background that shows you that you are in video mode and not accidentally working in video mode when you wanna do photos. If we now press menu here, we have a different menu, which is focusing on the video features. Of course, some are the same: focusing, exposure metering, exposure compensation, ISO auto settings, white balance. We don't need to talk about them. Those are basically the same like in photo mode. Scene mode, I don't use. Optical stabilization, I talked about. Now it's getting interesting. Video format and resolution. Here we have MOV and MP4. I highly recommend to always use MOV, never use MP4. The MOV codec is just a better codec. You have more control over it. The MP4 are smaller files, but the quality is not that good, and you cannot, for example, shoot in log when you are in an MP4 codec. Here I think we have the biggest difference to the SL3 menu. The new video profiles in the SL3, in the new designed SL3 menu, are fantastic. If you're interested how they work, check it out in that video. I truly hope that Leica adapts that into the Q3. I think that should be possible because it's basically just a graphical thing. And I truly hope that they're going to implement it in one of the coming firmware updates of the Q3. But now, as of the moment I'm shooting this video, we're stuck with this. So let me show you how I set it up. In MOV, you have the different resolutions: Cinema 8K, 8K, Cinema 4K, 4K, Full HD in ProRes, and Full HD in H.264. I have 4K, which is H.264, and I am using the 400 megabits 422 10-bit settings. These are basically my YouTube settings. Then we come to video settings. In video settings, we have microphone and noise reduction. I don't use the microphone that much from the Q3. When I do video, I have external microphones. But what we need to talk about is video gamma. I, of course, have set this on L log, which gives me the most control in color correction later when I'm editing the video. Customize control, we talked about that. It's the same as in photo. HDMI with audio. Oh, I need to turn off because otherwise I will have feedback. I rarely use my Q3 as a video player, so I have turned this off because otherwise I may have feedback if it's connected to a TV that has turned audio on and I want to just use it as a control monitor when I'm filming something, so it's better to turn that off. Digital zoom again I have on 28. I did test other settings. The quality suffers. It's not, unfortunately, just cropping in the sensor and using every pixel or whatever, because the sensor would be big enough. This would actually be in video a function that I think that could be improved. As far as my testing goes, I have not have great results when cropping and then shooting video because you cannot change it later. It's the same if you would shoot a JPEG in photo. So I recommend to have it on 28 millimeters to get the best results. User profiles we talked about, capture assistance talked about also, play mode, I don't use that, display settings as well, Leica photos as well. Then formatting the card we talked about, the camera settings we talked about, it's the same as in photo, the camera information we talked about, the language, and resetting the camera, which I'm not gonna do right now because I have finally set it up. These are my Leica Q3 settings. If you have any ideas how I can optimize them, please leave them in the comments. If you want to see more about the Q3, check out this video. If you want to see how I set up my SL3, check out this video. Stay curious!